Let me ask Dr. Noe, if we've been mistaken to focus on the brain in our studies of consciousness, what specifically should scientists look at instead to illuminate the mysteries of consciousness?
You asked at the beginning, can we even ask this question, what is consciousness? And in a way, I thought that was a very nice way of posing the question. Let's reflect a little bit about the question itself. I think part of the problem is that sometimes we take it for granted, we think we know what it is, it's a feeling, it's like the taste of chocolate, and then we just want to understand what happens in the brain when you have that feeling. But if you really start to even think about how to describe the taste of chocolate, think about the way in which the person you're eating the chocolate with makes a difference to how the chocolate tastes. I mean, these things are really quite contextual and quite subtle. And I've come up with a different way, a sort of a different shorthand way of epitomizing what the problem of consciousness is. And I put it like this: the question of consciousness is the question of how the world shows up for us. If I walk into a room and there's a piece of offensive graffiti on the wall, but if it's in a language I don't know, then it's in a script I cannot read, it doesn't show up for me. It's as if it's not there. If I do know that language, if I can read that language, all of a sudden, the automatic indicators of an emotional state kick in. My heart will start to pound, my cheeks will flush, I'll feel rage. But it's not as though I first look at the letters, then ascribe an interpretation, realize that the interpretation is actually derogatory and offensive, and then get angry. I see it, it shows up for me, because of all this background knowledge that I have. And I'm very interested in the way in which the cultivation of knowledge, that's a very general term, but by that I mean all sorts of practical skills as well as more refined forms of intellectual knowledge. The way in which knowledge, our skills, open up the world for us. That's why it's so important that we educate our children. Because when we give them new skills, new knowledge, we actually give them new ways of picking up what is actually going on there in front of them. This is also why I think I just want to actually relate this to this other theme that came up in the exchange thus far, which I found very interesting, about the value of awareness of the unconscious, or the making explicit, or the bringing into reflection. One of the interesting things is that we often have a feeling of there's actually a kind of a first order emotion of confusion about how it is that we manage to lock onto the world, bring it into focus for us. And one of the domains where I think we get to solve that confusion is art. And let me just give, I think maybe I'm speaking too long, but let me just give you a very brief example. You go to a gallery and you look at a picture by an artist whose work is unfamiliar to you, in a style that is unfamiliar to you. It sometimes happens that you don't get it. The work is just flat. It's opaque. It has no meaning or depth. But imagine your friend who brought you to the gallery is a great fan of this artist and has thought a lot about this work and draws your attention to some aspects that you hadn't paid attention to, or tells you something about the circumstances in which the piece was made. Something remarkable can happen. All of a sudden, the work discloses itself to you. You can now see a depth you couldn't see before. You can now see a meaning you couldn't see before. Now the transformation that has occurred is in you. It's not in the painting, for the sake of argument, okay? So the change is in you. But what kind of a transformation is this? A transformation that consists in your finally now being able to see what was there all along. Bringing the world into focus. And this happens through conversation. Now I think this kind of opportunity, art gives us the opportunity to have this kind of experience, but that's actually the fundamental character of all our perceptual experience. And art gives us thus an opportunity to get clear about all our perceptual experience. And that's what philosophy is at too. So I'm answering your question this way. I think we really need to think in a kind of personal transformational way about what our lives are. This is a problem for science, but it is a problem for all of us. There's a line, there's a Delmore Schwartz line, I no more wrote than read that book, which is the self I am. And I think that's the problem that we all face. And the science of consciousness, together with this kind of mindfulness practices that Paul was speaking about, and philosophy, that's what they should be targeting at.
Yeah, this to me is the most difficult question in science. And no matter how you approach it, you risk sounding clueless. So let's applaud these thinkers for the courage to appear in public and discuss it.